You are on, Mr. Tom DiRenzo.
Okay. First of all, don't expect the kind of energy you've been seeing from James. If I got down on my knees, I would never be able to get up. So I'll try to be as loud as possible, but don't expect me to be jumping around up here. Okay. So the general theme of my talk is, okay, you've lobbied your corporation that exporting is a strategy that should be followed, and you've done a lot of homework and showed them figures and so forth, and finally they say to you, okay, let's do it, and you're in charge, you're now vice president of foreign development or exporting or whatever you call it. So now what happens? Well, the first thing is that old axiom about be careful what you wish for because you might get it, because once you get that responsibility, you're going to find out that it's not very easy to be an exporter. There are a lot of problems, a lot of rewards too for both the company and for you if you're successful at it. But to be successful, there's a lot of very difficult issues that you have to deal with. The devil is in the details, is one of my favorite sayings about exporting. Today we're going to try and give you some insights about exporting in general and some practical knowledge about some of the nitty-gritty issues that must be dealt with in order to be successful at exporting. And so let me just start with a question here. What do anybody do you think is the most important thing you should do before you even think about exporting? Okay, anybody? How about market research? Okay, market research in the country that's your target for the exporting is going to inform almost everything else you do. You have to get in there, you're going to put a size, people, I'm sure at your class now, you know what market research is. You've got to put a size on the market, you got to know, as James spoke about, the culture, you got to know the available funds to buy things, you got to know the buying habits and so forth and so on. So don't even think about exporting unless you have the right market research behind it to make wise decisions. Let me ask you another question. This is almost like, you ever see Jay Leno? And he goes something called jaywalking, I think it's called, and he goes to college campuses and he asks people questions and they get really strange answers. Like one of them was, who was the first guy on the moon? And somebody said, Armstrong. He said, that's very good. What's the first name? They said, Louis. So anyway, here's a question. Why is the Panama Canal so important to people who want to export to Asia? Anybody have a clue on that one?
So you don't have to go
back there?
Yeah, don't go all the way around Africa.
Not Africa. South America. Cape Hope, that's right. If you want to export to Asia, and if you want to use one of the most economical ways, which is shipping by a boat, you're going to load up your boat on the East Coast, and somehow you have to get it past the West Coast and then over to Asia. So if you didn't have the Panama Canal, you'd have to go around Cape Hope, and Cape Hope, and then you have to come back up again. So if you can cut through right about the middle of the continent there, you're going to save maybe 1,000 miles in shipping. So it's very, very important that it exists. And we'll talk about the canal a little bit later as to it's going to become a bottleneck if they don't finish the widening project. And just to say that whatever I say here, each exporting company is different, each importing country is different, so whatever I say, there sure is heck going to be exceptions to what I say, and I just take that for granted. Okay, once you're committed and approved to start exporting, one of the first things you're going to do is look for a sales representation in the target country that you're going to export to. And you have three basic choices here. And again, there's a very big generalizations. Your options are to hire an agent, to hire a distributor, or to get a direct hire employee to work directly for your company. And let's focus first on agents and distributors, because they're probably the first things that you're going to look at. There are many ways to find agents and distributors. You can put ads in the journals, You can get referrals from people who are using agents and distributors. One good way is to look into catalogs and so forth and see what agents and distributors are already working the territory that you're interested in. And you contact them and say, can we do some business here? You've already heard about the Gold Key program, and that's a very good program. But it's kind of like a little bit like speed dating. It's like they make appointments for you as the exporter, and they got an importer, and you meet someplace over a table, and you talk for about 5 minutes, and then you move on. And in that short time, you make a decision as to whether you want to see that exporter again or you want to see that importer again. So you just keep moving it right down the line. Getting an agent is probably the quickest and the easiest thing you can do. It's not, doesn't take much investment on either the part of the exporter or the importer. And the way it works is that you sign up an agent and they get a small discount off the price of the goods and sometimes a commission. And in return, they'll do things like take an order, they'll collect money in the local currency, they'll convert the local currency to US dollars, and they'll send an order to the exporter with the payment. And that brings up another thing. When your order comes with the payment, that's known as payment with order, meaning we're not going to do a darn thing until we get the money. So if you send us an order and you don't send us the money, we're not going to take it. That's a condition that can be changed after the importer and the exporter get to trust each other a little bit, and we'll talk about that later on. So these functions that I mentioned, they're the same functions that a distributor might do for you, except the distributor will warehouse your product. An agent, 99% of the time, will not warehouse your product. And that's very important, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So eventually, if the agent gets an order, they'll send you the order, usually with payment, and then the exporter will ship off a one-off shipment to the end user or maybe to the agent, depending on how it's all set up. Now, the problem is that agents represent many product lines. They have even represent competing products in many cases. They give you little or no customer service, and they may not even remember that they represent your products. And I've had that happen to me personally. Going to Japan and looking at the catalog that my agent had, and I said, well, where's so-and-so? And he said, well, we don't carry that. Well, it turned out it was listed in the catalog, but the salesperson that I was talking to didn't even remember that. Basically, what happens with an agent is that the customer in the importing country will probably find the agent. They'll determine that they need this product for one reason or another, and they'll say, how can I get this American product that we don't make here, we don't have here? And so they'll start looking up for agents that might carry that. They'll query the agent, and if they have it, they'll buy through that agent. The agent will not be an effective marketer for any of your individual products because your product is just one of many in that catalog. And if you think about things like Heartland and Dr. Leonard's and whatever else you get where there's a big catalog, there's a lot of products in there, but the catalog company does not do much to promote any one product unless you, the seller, give the catalog person more money. And then they'll highlight something, they'll use color, or they'll use boldface or something to try and make your item stand out. But left to their own devices, your product will not get any more attention than the rest of the catalog. Okay, so that's basically a summary of using an agent. Now, another choice is what I call the stocking distributors, and it's not only me that calls them that, everybody calls them that. Now, these are harder to obtain than agents because they actually buy the product at a substantially reduced price from the exporter, and then they store it until they can sell it in the country. So what this means is that the distributor has their own investment in your product that can only be recouped by them selling your product. So that is a motivating factor. We put this money up and we better sell this or we're going to be in trouble. So therefore, the distributor is more likely to give you better sales effort and also to give you more customer service because it's going to wind up in sales for them, and they got this product sitting in the warehouse and they want to get rid of it. The distributor however, realizes that being a stocking distributor, buying the product in advance is a real risk, and they will not make a deal with an exporter unless they're pretty sure that there is an adequate market for that product in their country. So you go looking for a stocking distributor, but unless you have a very convincing argument that you developed through what? Market research, that there is a big untapped market in that country, you're going to have a hard time signing up a stocking distributor. Yes, James?
Just check.
Okay.
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
So, a rep agency working with the exporter, they don't actually ship anything, so that it's basically a direct sell
From the States.
from A to B.
Yep.
Then whereas distributor brings in all the product, and they pay all the shipping charges. I mean,
Well,
essentially-
we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's negotiable.
Yeah.
Shipping charges are a big, big issue when it comes to exporting. And there's a variety of arrangements that can be made. And it depends on the contract that you negotiate with your stocking distributor.
Does working with a distributor give added cachet or,
I'm sorry, could you go back and say the first sentence again?
does working with a distributor give added cachet or added oomph to a product than working with
Well,
an agent?
a cachet, yeah, I guess so. If it's a high-class distributor, it'd probably help. But that's really not what you're looking. What you're looking for is somebody who knows the territory, knows how to make a sale, knows how to stock the product so it doesn't go bad if it's that kind of product, has the capability to follow up and offer some technical advice to people who are using the product if it's that kind of product. So if you're that kind of a distributor, you probably have some cachet, and so therefore it might help the sale in that country.
I'm sorry, one more. Is the distributor typically located in that region, or are they?
Well, they
in the same-
could.
I mean, does it matter if they're in your region or the customer region?
It matters, but in some cases, you're going to have a national distributor, in Japan especially, national, but they have subsidiaries in many cities. So if they have one in the cities that you're trying for, or you really want to try and penetrate the whole country, well, that's fine, you get a national one. But sometimes the big guys won't take you, and they want, you'll start with a smaller one that's only taking care of a little region or something like that. When I worked for this chemical company that made the cleaners and lubricants, we could not find anybody in China that would represent us for the whole country because we didn't have a proven track record in China. So what we got was somebody who was taking care of a region, and based on that success, then some other people, some other distributors came along and said, well, we'd like to handle your product too. Unfortunately, we did not have exclusivity with this first distributor, so we were able to negotiate additional distributors in the country. We'll talk about exclusivity a little later on too. Okay, so once you've found either a distributor or an agent who's willing to work with you, the idea, the next thing you have to do, is to get to a contract. You do not want to have a business relationship that is not spelled out in pretty great detail in a contract. I don't know if James has mentioned this, but the Chinese are not one to put a whole lot of verbiage into their contract. Americans, on the other hand, usually show it to a lawyer, and the lawyer adds all kinds of paragraphs in there, and the Chinese say, well, we don't want to deal with this. So it's a hard negotiation right there, just to get a contract that covers your needs, but is also acceptable to the culture of the country that you're dealing with. So again, it's another one of these things that's not easy to deal with. Well, anyway, you do need a contract. You need it written. You need it signed by both parties. And one of the key requirements in the contract is to have a get-out clause that says that either party can cancel this with 90 days or 60 days or 2 months, whatever you want to put in there, without any reason whatsoever, and so you can get out if things go disastrously bad for either side. One place where you can't get out of your contracts because of the culture is India. If you make an arrangement with a distributor there or an agent and you have a contract, it's going to be harder to get out of than a marriage. They believe, although it may not be spelled out that way in your contract, and this is from bitter personal experience, they believe that they have you for life as a client if you sign them up as a distributor or an agent. And they're not going to let you out easily. If you invoke the clause that says I can give you 90 days and get out of it, and you do that, they're going to sue you. They're going to come back and they're going to say you have to come to India to stand trial or something like that. So the bottom line is, I don't think they can really enforce it, but it becomes a lot of headaches dealing with all the correspondence that comes in. And there's always a threat that maybe they'll be able to do something about it. Now, one of the things that you want to get into your contracts if possible, but again, depends on how badly you need the distributor or you want the distributor or the agent. You could put into the contract that this renewal every year depends on your achieving certain sales goals, quotas. And if they accept that, that's great, because then at the end of the year, you can say, well, you didn't make your sales quota, but we like the effort you're putting into it, so we're going to keep you. Or you could say, we think you did a lousy job, and we're going to let you go, except in India. But again, you have to be smart enough, if you're the exporter, you have to be smart enough to think to put these items into your contract. So there you go. You heard some of it tonight. You can do a little bit of research if you're going to write one of these contracts, but the key word is negotiate. James.
What happened to that Indian contact? Did you really have to pay them for 1 full year?
No, well, we didn't have to pay them because they weren't selling anything. That's the other thing. They didn't sell anything. We had them for over a year, maybe 2 years, and they didn't do a thing. They didn't sell one item. So we said, okay, we're using this clause, we're letting you go. And what we got were threatening letters. They just kept sending us threatening letters. They said, you can't do this, we're citing this law, the Indian Constitution, whatever. And at first we were concerned, and we just kept piling it up. And then we took the position, well, what are you going to do? They want us to come to India. We're not going to go to India. We're going to come and kidnap us. So we're going to do that. Now, we were afraid that maybe they would have a lawyer in the United States that would come and say, okay, you're going to drag you into a federal court or something like that. They didn't do that. And as far as I know, it just withered and died, and that was the end of it. You know, like a lot of threats that come from a lot of different kinds of organizations that just don't follow up on it. But I've talked to other people, and they said that's not an uncommon experience in India. They just keep pursuing you and hope that you'll give up and stay with them. Why they would want it, I don't know. They didn't sell anything, but I guess they just wanted to, in case they could sell something. All right, we talked about, or we mentioned anyway, exclusivity as an issue in signing an agent or a distributor. An exclusive agreement arrangement means that the agent or the distributor is the only one in a particular area, be it a region, be it the country or the continent or whatever, is the only one who's authorized to sell your product in that area, in the defined area. And if anybody else manages to sell the product in that area, the exclusive distributor or agent will get credit for it, for whatever bonus benefit that is towards their contract. So the agent and the distributor will claim, and this is an optional thing, you can make them exclusive or not. Well, some agents or distributors won't accept the contract unless it is exclusive, and some will, and it's up to you to decide if you're going to go along with it or not. But the agent and the distributor will claim that it needs to be exclusive because they want to, they always tell you, we want to spend money on your product, we want to advertise it, we want to promote it, and we're going to make this investment, and if we don't have exclusive, then if somebody else, so another agent sells it in our territory, or the end user orders directly from you, the exporter, then we get shafted. We don't get any credit for those sales. So that's the agent-distributor side. Now, on the exporter side, the exporter worries that the agent or the distributor will profit from orders that they did little to earn, to work, little work for. And this would be a case like, let's assume you've been thinking about promoting into China or exporting to China, and you've done some preliminary promotion in there without an agent, without a distributor. Maybe you attended some exhibits in there like my company did before we actually had an agent. And maybe you had some articles appear in the journals about your product. And so you have kind of primed the market. So the exporter's fear is that the day after you sign a contract, an exclusive contract, a sale will come through, a big order will come through from somebody that was already ready to buy, and the agent or the distributor didn't do anything. So it's a calculated risk, whether you let them have the exclusive or you don't have the exclusive. Excuse me, go ahead.
So I work for a wholesale distributor, so I have a lot of questions.
For what?
I work for a wholesale distributor, so
Okay.
I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah.
Some regions require certain business to go through distribution. I mean, that's just the evolution of the markets. Is that correct? I mean, would you agree with that?
I don't think I get the question, try again.
Certain products or certain industries
Yeah.
typically, will go 90 or 95% through distribution to the customers.
Okay.
Would you agree with that on a lot of industries?
Well, in the United States, probably, yeah, but when you're exporting, I think it's a whole different, operation there. If that is the nature of that product in the country, the target country, well, then it's going to be through a distributor. In Japan, I think it's hard for anybody to buy a product directly. It's almost always go through some kind of distributor because they have this elaborate markup system. But I don't think that's the case in China. I think that you can sell directly if the buyer has the money and the foreign currency to buy from you. And one of the things is that if you're exporting from the United States, one of the reasons why you're going to be able to export is you have products that they don't have in that country. That's why they let you sell them the product, let you export the product to their country.
May I add something to
Go ahead.
that? Our experience at ISI in China, in a way, because Tom and I were selling scientific databases and products, and in China, the government control trade of information and publications. And so in a way, we had to deal with the handful. In the beginning, when China first opened up, we had to deal with about 3 to 5 importers. Shanghai Book Traders, CNPIEC, that stands for China National Publications Import and Export Corporation. We had to deal with China Book Import Center. So that is precisely your model that you are saying, do we have to? Yes, we have to. However, Tom and I could still be allowed to send direct mail pieces to professors and engineers and hospitals, to doctors, to promote our books, except that they cannot buy directly from us. What they did was, we did the promotion to make the customers, the end users, become aware of our products. Then they would then give their monies to the distributors. So we still have to do that.
Yeah, but it might be, just forget China, take another country. It might be that in that country, let's say all petroleum-derived products go through a certain kind of distributor, more by custom than law. Well, then you're pretty much going to have to follow that unless you can make an exceptional case. But in some cases, there is no preset distribution channel for any particular product, and you're free to set it up as you see fit. Okay, one of the things the exporter can do if they're being forced into an exclusive arena, I know you use the word force, there's no force, this is you have to decide that it's to your benefit to go along with this, it's a compromise. But one of the things you can do is that if you're going to give the exclusive agreement, you can temper it by saying, here's a list of house accounts. Who knows what a house account is? House account, okay. House accounts is a list of accounts. When you come together and you sign it, an addendum to the contract will be a list of accounts that the exporter claims to have already been working on or have already made sales to or have already had inquiries from, and they feel, the exporter feels that they're right on the verge of making a sale, so they don't want the distributor or the agent to get the credit for it, and they say, okay, you can have this whole country except for these accounts. This is our list of house accounts, and no matter what happens with these house accounts, you get no credit for it. And then the importer has to decide whether they want the account bad enough, wants your account bad enough to allow that into the contract. just a little strategy. Another way to kind of modify the exclusivity clause is that you can say to a distributor or an agent, okay, you have the petroleum sector. You can sell to anybody involved in the petroleum sector because we know we've done no work in that sector to promote. We have no increase in it whatsoever. So anything that happens is going to be to your credit. On the other hand, stay out of automobile manufacturing because we've been spending a lot of time already before we signed you up as an agent. So you can do that by sector, and you could also do it by geography. If you got a big country, you can say, look, we pretty much promote it on your East Coast, but so you can't have exclusivity for that. But anything out in the West, well, that's yours, so you have an exclusive arrangement for that. And then once again, they got to decide, both parties have to decide if that's what they want to do. Bottom line, the advantages and the disadvantages of exclusivity vary, and it's you got to decide what's best for you. It's smart, we're still talking contracts now, it's smart to build into a contract with a distributor or an agent the requirement to give the exporter a periodic report to whom the sales were made and for what amounts. And this addresses the question that comes up frequently. If an agent or a distributor is selling something for you, whose customer is that? Is it your customer as the exporter, or is it the customer of the distributor? You can make an argument either way. But if you think of it, when you write your contract, and you can get it negotiated into the contract that you're going to get these kind of reports, good for you, because then you'll know who your customers are in the export or in the importing country. Now, why might that be important? Why would you want to know who your customers are? Good.
If the contract expires, you can go directly to the customers.
Good one. That's a very good one. How about, what else can you do with the list of customers?
It's the type of people that are buying or type of companies that are buying products, you
Absolutely.
can then target them specifically.
Do your market research on there. What positions did I hold? What do they do with the product? How about if there's some technical information that you want to get out right away, recall or something, you can send it directly. And you can promote them on additional uses of the product. So there's a lot of things you can do with the list of customers that you get from an agent or a distributor. But believe me, they're not all willing to give it to you. So this is what you take over the table, over a drink. Better if you do it over a martini, because I found most foreign people are not good drinkers. Did you have a question? No, sorry about that. Okay.
Also, Tom, it's always good to know your customers because you get a lot of strategic marketing information from them directly.
Of course. Yep. Yep. Okay, so let's assume we have a contract and we're ready to do business. And one of the things you have to consider, and this goes into your decision about using an agent or using a stocking distributor, are freight costs. Freight costs are a key reason for choosing a stocking distributor over an agent if you can get a stocking distributor. Here's what happens. If you have an agent, they will give you a one-off order. So they're going to order 1 unit, 2 units, and you're going to ship it one-off. Shipping costs are very expensive for foreign destinations, okay? So what happens is the customer on the other end, let's say your price is $500, and then the freight becomes $200. They see $700 is the end price, and that might knock it out of the price range that they could afford. It might make it more or less competitive with some domestic products, which are maybe not as good as yours, but are going to be substantially cheaper because they don't have to pay the freight to get it there. So the advantage then with a distributor who buys in bulk, because they're going to put it into their warehouse, the distributor is buying in bulk because you probably give them a better discount on the product itself, and then also they'll get the best freight rate because the more you ship at one time, the cheaper the freight is going to be. So just distributors typically order at least enough to fill a pallet. Does anybody know what a pallet is? You guys got to get out in the warehouse once in a while. You know. Okay. A pallet is like a 4x4 wooden platform with some space in it so you can put forklift tines into the spaces, and then you pile your product up on that, and you usually seal it in plastic, and you pick it up, and makes it more convenient to move it around and ship it, and it offers a certain amount of protection from theft if it's sealed off properly. But so the minimum that a distributor or an agent's going to order from you is probably a pallet, and you'll already be gaining some advantages in shipping costs. But they strive to fill a container. A container is a big metal device that's usually 20 feet or 40 feet. And the thing about a container is that you pay a flat rate based on the size of the container, the 20 feet or the 40-foot container. And it's like one of these bags, these shopping bags, where they say you can put as much in as you can. That's the thing. There is no limit on how many units you can put into that container. You'll still pay the same price as long as they can close the lid. And that's where the advantage comes. There's another advantage, is that with a container, you can put a lock on it, padlock on it, that only the importer will be able to open. And there's also a seal to show that the container has not been opened and then locked up again. And so you get greater security, prevention of theft, and you do that. The newest container ships can now carry 15,500 containers. And the plan is that by 2013, they're going to be able to carry 18,000 containers. And I don't know if you've seen these ships down on the Delaware River there, they pile the containers way up, they're in the bottom and all that. Balancing the ship is a real problem. They got to take on a lot of water to correct the tilt one way or the other. There's newer ships that are going to carry 18,000 containers by 2013. The Panama Canal is in the process of being widened so that these bigger ships can get through the Panama Canal. Let's make an example so you can see how dramatic the difference may be. Let's suppose your product sells for $500 and weighs 70 pounds. Now you get an order from Japan and you ship it one off, probably going to cost you $100 or maybe even more to get it there, depending on the particular method that you use. So what you're doing then, if it costs $100 to ship it, you're adding 20% to the cost of the product, because it's now going to cost $600 to the customer to get that product. But if we can assume that we can fit 100 units into a container, a 20-foot or a 40-foot container, and say the flat rate price is $3,000 for that container, well now if you got 100 units and the price is $3,000, then how much is the freight for each unit? $30. Okay, so now the $30 is only 6% of the original $500 cost for the item, and so the customer winds up getting a break of $70 to buy your product. And believe me, that's a big, big issue, is how much is it going to cost to get the product there. So reducing freight costs makes your product more competitive in a foreign country. So that's the freight aspect of it. Now in shipping, there's paperwork and other logistics that have to be dealt with, and these are formidable. A sale typically starts, once you have your agent, distributor established, you'll get a quotation, and not a quotation, you're going to get a request for a quotation. Okay, and again, depending on the agent, depending on the distributor, depending on what country they're in, the command of English, it's going to sound like, in many cases, like one of these letters from Nigeria offering you a couple of $100,000, you know, if you'll only do this or that. So the problem there is you must take the time to make sure you understand what they are asking you to quote on, and to determine what the terms and conditions are of when they're going to pay, how soon do they expect the product to be delivered, anything you can think of. The bill to and the ship to address have to be correct, and make sure they establish the bill to and ship to. So you get all these things straightened out before you go to the next step, which is making the actual quotation. And one of the preferred ways to make the actual quotation is a device called a pro forma invoice. How about that? Anybody know what a pro forma invoice is? Okay, tell us what it is.
It's a future order.
A future order. That's pretty much it. What it is, it's a practice invoice. In other words, as the exporter, I'm saying, I understand your request for a quote. We've already talked about all these questions and language that I didn't understand. We got it all straightened out. I am now going to commit this to an invoice. I'm going to make this invoice, and it's going to have all the terms and conditions on this invoice. The price, it's going to have bill to, ship to, going to have terms of payment. Everything you can think of is going to be on this invoice, except it's not a real invoice. When I send it to the importer knows that it's not an official part of my system. It's not an account payable for me, or an account receivable. And when the importer gets it, he knows it's not an account payable. It's a practice invoice. Now, the importer will take a look at it and check all the terms, just as we did when we put them onto the pro forma invoice. And they will decide whether it meets what they thought they were asking for. And if they do, then the next thing that'll happen is you'll get a fax, or you'll get an email, or sometimes even a letter, a mailed letter, although that's pretty rare these days. And they'll say, you know, we accept your pro forma invoice, please ship the order. So at that time, you can then, if there's any changes, maybe they'll say we accept it with this change, and if you accept the change, you make another invoice, but then this becomes the real invoice. It's entered into your accounting system, and when they receive it, it's entered into their accounting system, and you're ready to ship the goods. Another thing that's important in these pro formas is who pays for the customs fees. Sometimes you pay for everything, the exporter, sometimes the importer pays. Usually you come up with some kind of half and half. You pay to get it to the outside of the United States, and they'll pay to get it into their country. But that gets negotiated out. I mentioned the ship to, the bill to. Everybody understands what that is. When you create an invoice, there's usually a bill to, and then there's a ship to. Many times they're the same, but in many countries what you have is some agency or corporate headquarters is paying the money out of a fund that they have, but they have a factory a couple of 100 miles away, and that's where the product has to go. So the bill really needs to go to the bill to, but the product has to go to the ship to. And many times people just forget that, and they don't question the accuracy of the addresses and stuff like that. They can't understand them, they just wing it, and then the thing winds up going a couple 100 miles away from where it's supposed to be, and it's very expensive then to move it again to where it goes, and somebody's got to pay for that. So bill to, ship to is very important, and this is a key thing, and is frequently forgotten, is to put an expiration date on your pro forma. When you send your pro forma, you say all these terms and conditions that are listed here, all these prices, these expire within 90 days usually is a good time, but you can make it longer or shorter if you want. Because what will happen, and this has happened to me, 2 years after you send out the pro forma invoice, they'll come back to you and say, okay, we would now like this price you quoted us 2 years ago. And you say, well, the cost of the raw materials have gone up a lot since then. We can't possibly give you that price. Well, you put it here, and there's no limitation, there's no expiration date. So put that on your checklist. If you're writing out one of these pro formas, say when the conditions and terms will expire. Okay, so now you have an order, and everybody understands the terms and conditions. And at this point, I would say that unless you're familiar with terms like ex-works, free on board, free alongside, delivered at the frontier, you might want to think about getting a good freight agent to help you with the shipping, especially if this is the first time you've ever done that. You may be on a single order. You may have to use trucks, rail, a ship, and maybe even air freight in there somewhere to get to your destination. Usually you don't use all of them, but that's all the possibilities that you might have to use. And then once you just to show you, here's I'm sure this is on a disc now or online, but this book here is strictly devoted to what's called Incoterms for Americans, which these are these terms and conditions that you put into a pro forma invoice or an invoice as to who pays for what and where it's going to be delivered to. It's going to be delivered to X Works. It means we're going to put it on our loading dock and the importer has to come and get it. That's the extreme one way. Or you could say delivered to Quayside, which it will go to the dock in the other country if they have a dock. So there are this many terms that have to be thought about and possibly applied if you're going to do that kind of work. This is something I held up too. This is one of these, this is what the exporting process may look like, especially if you got the order. So it just goes to all the dead ends.
Don't scare them.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to give them useful information, but as I said, there are big, big rewards. And one of them is going to be if you're the person who gets the responsibility for the exporting and you learn these things or you get somebody to help you that knows how to do these things, you've created a great amount of job security for yourself. Because there's usually only one person in the company that knows how to do this. And when they say, well, let's lay off some people. Well, let's lay off that guy that's doing the export thing. You know, we'll get a secretary to do that or something, you know. And then they say, well, yeah, but he knows all those terms. And they say, who's going to do that? Not me, not you. And I said, so you probably get yourself a little bit more job security than you might imagine by knowing this stuff. Another thing you want to make sure you get is international insurance coverage, because a lot of people, when they haven't exported before, they say, well, we have an insurance policy that covers the whole company for loss of goods. Well, unless that policy was written with a clause that says it covers international shipments too, you might find that you don't have the coverage. So it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's going to be well worth getting it. Now, some goods are going to be sensitive to the security of the USA, so you might need an export license. That's another piece of paperwork that takes some skill to complete. Right now, I think it's any product that they think can be used to create uranium is not permitted. Certain types of computer hardware and software are not permitted without the license, and even if you apply for the license, they may not let you do it. Some chemicals are not available for export, and it's kind of in the reverse direction. In the UK, not too long ago, they put a ban, well, the US put a ban on, the UK would not ship something called thiopentyl sodium. That's the drug they use when they give a lethal injection to a prisoner. That's one of the drugs. And the UK decided that they did not want to be part of any kind of execution, so they put a ban on this product, could not be exported from their country. Now, the US here, we depended on that product, so they went crazy, and they had to come up with another formula to take the place of that particular drug. Hazardous goods, if they're flammable, explosive, corrosive, carcinogenic, are probably going to need some more paperwork to declare what the hazards are, what degree of hazards they are. This is all before you can make your shipment. Now, here's one of my favorite types of logistical problems that come up with shipping. We all know what a pallet is now. It's a 4x4 piece of wood, assembly of wood, that's, you stack up product on it, the forklift puts it up. We were using pallets, wooden pallets, for a long time to ship products into China. And everything was going along swimmingly, you know, 3, 4, 5 years, no problem whatsoever. And one day, I get a call that our product was being detained by the Chinese government on the dock down in China, or out in China. And the reason was that the Chinese government thought that there were insects inside the wood, not specifically in our pallet, but in all pallets made of this kind of wood, that there could be larvae in there or eggs or whatever, and they were not going to let that into the country. So without asking us our permission, they treated it, they called people, sprayed it with insecticide, and they said, okay, now we're going to release it, but you owe us, whatever, $500 for this particular treatment. And then they said, and when you send us any more pallets, if they're wood, you have to give us a certification that they've been sprayed the same way that we sprayed them, and you got to have a certificate of that. Or you have to go to plastic pallets, because plastic pallets are not subject to these insects. Well, we discussed that for a long time. The wooden pallets are a lot cheaper than the plastic ones, but we figured out that with all the trouble of trying to get the spray guy to come in, get the certificate on, we bit the bullet, and we decided to use plastic pallets. So, just one more thing. One more, and I'll skip a couple that I had here. That one time we were asked by a state in the United Arab Emirates. They had placed an order, and they wanted us, my company, to certify that no Israeli materials were used in manufacturing the product, and that once we shipped it, it would not pass through any Israeli port. So we got that. It was a big order. So we sat down, and thankfully, the owner of my company took the moral approach and said, "We're not going to do this." And we said, "Thank you, but unless you change the requirement, we can't ship you the product." Sometimes people will come back to you if you refuse them and say, "Oh, we were only kidding, you know, don't worry about it," and they'll buy. But most of the time, they won't, if they make that kind of a demand. Okay, one more thing. Another thing is the expiration dates and time-limited warranties attached to your products. There's a possible problem, especially when you're using a stocking distributor. Stocking distributor is going to try and order as much as possible because they're going to get a bigger discount, they're going to save on the freight. But then, if they don't sell it, it sits in the distributor's warehouse until the expiration dates pass. One of my companies sold a lubricant that had a 6-month expiration date on it, and they bought too much of it, the importer, and it sat there, and the expiration date passed. So we had to come up with a compromise. So we decided to replace the product free of charge, but we charged them for the freight, and everybody was kind of happy with that. But then we changed the expiration time to a year, because after further analysis we decided that 6 months was too conservative, that it really didn't need that short of a time. Getting paid is another difficulty in exporting, and the most troublesome situation is the first order from an agent or a distributor, or even a direct order from a customer. The importer is reluctant to pay with the order, cash with order, because it has no reliability, no experience with the reliability of the seller. The seller might get your money and then not ship the product, or ship defective product. So this brand new relationship, they're concerned. The exporter is reluctant to ship because they have no experience with the importer as to how they're going to pay. They may not pay you if you ship the goods without money. So what you have is like a Mexican standoff, although you might be dealing in France, you know. So anyone know how to handle that? Letter of credit. Who said that? Good. You know what you're doing back there. Okay. That's it. You create a letter of credit. And this is what the deal is. You create this document, and what happens is the buyer puts money into an escrow account, and the seller, once he hears that the money is in the escrow account, will ship the goods. They get to the destination, and the goods are inspected by a third party, an independent third party, usually a bank. And if the goods are okay and they're released, then the seller gets the money immediately, and the buyer gets the goods immediately. And that works very well for a first-time transaction, but it does cost some money and some labor. And once again, here is a book on all the language and terms and conditions that you need when you write one of these letters of credits, or when you obtain one of these letters of credit. And there's a cost involved. There's a significant cost, not overwhelming, but a significant cost. So once you get, what happens usually is after you do 1 or 2 transactions where you use a letter of credit, you get to trust each other, and you say, okay, we're going to give you an open account. So the importer orders, and you say, okay, you have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to pay, and then hopefully they're going to pay within that time without going through the letter of credit business. There's sometimes concerns about volatile currencies, that they'll change dramatically from the time of the sale to the time of the payment. And so what you want to use is a form of arbitrage to take care of that. And if you don't know what arbitrage is, I can't really define it for you, but it's some kind of an organization that will take a bet about what the currency is going to be, but will guarantee whatever rate you're willing to pay for. In other words, if you say, I want 10 euros for every $50 or something like that. They'll make sure that you'll get that rate, and they take the risk somehow. And they profit on some transactions, they lose on some transactions. Hopefully balance out, and that's why they call it arbitrage. And there's a cost for that service too. So now the question is, how do you assess the performance of your distributor or agent? And obviously, sales is the final and best measure, but it may take some time to develop sales in a country that you've paid no attention to until now. So maybe some interim measures is that you'll say to the agent or the distributor, are you translating my sales literature and making it available to your people, your customers, so that they can better understand my product, or are you still trying to give it to them in English? And you'll be surprised how many will not translate because it's another investment on their part. But if you get a good one, or you write that as part of the requirement that they must translate so many pages of promotional material every year, then you'll be entitled to get that. Again, you should require your agent or distributor to provide periodic reports on promotional activities like ads and mailings, exhibits. Again, this is very basic, but you'll be surprised how many exporters do not ask for that particular kind of reporting. And this will, again, give you an indication, other than sales, that these people are doing something for you. Now we're going to talk about promotional marketing versus educational marketing. Promotional, and this is important to understand the difference because this will help you decide whether you really need a stocking distributor or a direct hire. Promotional is when your product is well understood and the benefits are clear. So really all you have to do is promote it over the competition. You overcome some objections such as price, packaging, advertising, and direct response and low-level salesmanship will usually accomplish that job. Educational marketing is needed when the product is so radically new or different that its unique applications and benefits are not easily grasped by the potential customers. This might be a new medical diagnostic device or a bolt with built-in telemetry, or even a new kind of index that one of my companies put out that most scientists and librarians didn't believe it would work. Now, to educate your prospects, to make it clear that the product can do what you say it can, this will involve usually high-level salesmanship rather than lower-level salesmanship. You must give seminars, you give free trials, you publish articles and case histories in trade magazines, scientific and technical journals. Anything you can do to convince the people that these products will do what you say it will do. This is much more difficult than promotional marketing and much more expensive. Now, if your product needs educational marketing, an agent is likely no use to you whatsoever. You should get at least a distributor, a stocking distributor, and you might possibly start thinking about a direct hire. A direct hire, you have a couple of options. You can hire someone from the target country and set them up, and this is exponentially more complicated than trying to hire a domestic person. To hire a foreign national is very complicated. There's differences in employment laws and practices. It's difficult to terminate a foreign national in their own country, and paying the taxes and the pension for the employee in the business operation is very complicated. Or you could hire someone in the U.S. or take an existing employee in your company in the U.S. and assign them to the foreign country. This solves some but not all the administrative problems, and you have to be very careful that you don't use it as a dumping ground for your incompetent or disruptive employees, because if you send somebody over who's culturally insensitive, you could destroy your possibilities in that marketplace forever. So looking at the three representation options, the agent, the stocking distributor, and a direct hire, in my opinion is that you should first look for a stocking distributor as a good start. If you can't get a stocking distributor, you should probably go to an agent. And in my opinion, the direct hire representation is only called for when your product requires educational marketing and your marketing research has convinced you that the country has a very large untapped market for that product. That's it.
Thank you.